Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be, and whether you're watching live or archived. And welcome to episode number 82 of the Nautel Transmission Talk Tuesday webinar series. Had enough practice. I'm starting to get that out without stumbling over it. We're going to call it a win. Today, we're talking about, well, so if you read the promo, there'd be an NAB update and an AUI update, and we're going to put Matt's feet to the fire, so to speak. And with that, we've got the handsome, the talented Mr. Matt Herdon, one of our product managers and the guy who is able to answer all my dumb questions on AUI. So before we get rolling, Matt, first, thanks for being here again. I mean, we just got to talk a couple of days ago.
Yes, indeed.
So we'll run through some of that stuff as well. But first, the mandatory housekeeping stuff. Putting it at the front of the slide deck for anybody who was in our Thursday webinar session. We kind of hit it at the very end, but we'll put it at the beginning. If you've got any questions, comments, criticisms, there's an area to put the questions in on your control panel. Type your question in, hit the send button, it'll pop up on our screens. One of us will bring it into the conversation, or we'll do our very best to bring it into the conversation, depending on exactly how politically correct you've worded it. I may paraphrase a little bit in the process. By the same token, if you've got a microphone and you're not shy, hit the little hand wavy icon, and we'll certainly unmute you and make you part of the conversation. I see a couple of my favorite victims in the audience already, so we may unmute you and bring you into the conversation even if you don't raise your hand. Hope you're paying attention. On that note, I couldn't resist. So as I referenced last Thursday, 5 whole days ago, I don't know, yeah, 5 days ago, we got talking. One of the big things you'll see at NAB, you saw it last NAB, but this year it's a shipping product, is the VX series. So Max, just give me a quick rundown. No need to recap the 90-minute webinar we did last week. But
no,
but yeah.
if people want to write that really ridiculously hard sort of string down that's on the bottom there where it says YouTube, that's the 1.5 hour webinar that we did last week on this, and it goes into deep dive on all the technical things. But the high points are that we have a full range of the VX series from 150 watts all the way up to 6.6 kilowatts, the up to 2 kilowatts are available right now, and the 3 to 6 are going to be available in the second half of this year, first half of this year, before the summer. And yeah, it's a pretty awesome piece of kit. It's in the hands of a number of customers already. I think Jeff can speak to that maybe.
Well, I'm going to say you were there when I installed it, so yeah. We've got one on the air at Cove FM right now, 88.7 if you happen to be in Eastern Canada, or covefm.com if you don't, but that's, of course, the web stream. You're not listening to the transmitter at that point. Yeah. However, the AUI is working, and we'll be talking about that quite a bit as well.
Yes, exactly. So I don't think there's too much more that we have to say about this one. It's born and raised in North America, so I think it's going to be a really powerful tool in our kit. So I look forward to having everyone learn more about it.
So something else at NAB that we've only been showing for, I ran out of fingers, more than a few years.
Indeed. So the new AUI. So as some of you may recall, we use flash in our transmitters as the way of putting the AUI up on the screen, and we got to get rid of that. And so the new AUI is HML AUI for all Nautel transmitters, new and old, and runs in a modern browser, new Linux operating system, and so on. So that's you know, it's a good thing. You've heard me talk about it for years. And so let's go to the next slide. So I found the cutest elephant I could for the elephant that's in the room, and that is, where is the new AUI? So let's click to the next slide.
Are you sure we don't want to leave the elephant up for a little bit?
We can leave it up for a bit, but as you know, the AUI, I've promised it so many years now, and so it's been really tough because the challenges that we ended up facing were ones that we kind of couldn't really have predicted. So with the VS, and our strategy was to go with the VS because we knew it was the most constrained of the hardware platforms. And so, and one of the older ones. So we wanted to make sure that we could deal with that. Otherwise, we would get all comfy by doing something that was easy. And so the challenges we ran into were firmware updates and bootloaders and things like that. And so we were all set to have like a beta 3 a year ago, and that just did not happen. I can very happily say that we'll come to the good news in a second, but let's keep going.
Well, before we get going, we got some questions popping up. So let's hit them as they come up. Some I can answer, some I'm going to defer. Kira over in Vermont asked about how the Orban card's looking in the VX, and I can tell you I can answer that because I got the update this morning. And I mean, I know Matt knows it, but I got to share some of the good news too.
Totally.
So the cool thing is that they see the beta that I'm running is running version 6.03 software, and we knew when we installed it on the weekend or last Friday, right, Matt? Yeah.
Yep.
We knew that it's got Orban in it, but we knew the Orban was still locking up, and so the 603 software was configured to allow it to, if it detected a lockup, to reboot the system, which is, you know, still a minute off error, but it saved me a trip up the hill, which is a very good thing, especially at 1 a.m. I get cranky when that happens. And then Matt gets the email to let him know exactly how I feel. Anyway, so making a short story long, they've found the root cause, fixed the root cause, and the 6.1 software should be out next week if we're lucky, which means that we'll be shipping.
So, yeah,
right, because we actually want to test it.
Yeah, we go through a full regression test, and so I'm going to say by the end of next week we'll have that done and dusted. So yeah.
So Kira, the short answer is within a week and a half, Orban will be shipping. Was that cross fingers that I saw flicking up on the screen there below me?
No, that was thumbs up. That was
okay.
Up.
I thought it was.
No, I've stopped doing that. There's no point. It doesn't do anything.
Right. So before you progress, Williams asked if there will be a cost for a new AUI, and the answer is no. Now I'm going to quantify it. So first off, is there hardware to run the new AUI on older transmitters such as the NB? That's two separate questions. I think the plan is to not to have to do that, but because we haven't gone there yet, I can't state that categorically. Does that sound fair, Matt?
Yeah, and really, again, it comes back to what I said on the first one, which is that we chose the VS because it was the most limited. The NV, while the original one that had the, or one of the original ones that had the AUI on it, actually has more horsepower.
Yeah.
So I'm not expecting those kinds of issues on that platform. That doesn't mean there won't be issues. Right. So we're trying to, and this comes to the next bullet, which is the technology evolution, which is we've chosen, and you asked me to find out, and I did find out, a version of Linux called Yocto, and that particular version is quite modern, and therefore we're trying to shove this modern Linux variant onto chips that are 10 or older years, and that's obviously a challenge, and there are risks in doing that and challenges, and so you know, we'll get into some of those things in a second as well, but that's really where some of the goals and hurdles came from, was to be able to do that, but there's a price to pay. And
well, as Jeff Wilson said earlier, it's like trying to find a Windows 11 driver for a 20-year-old Audio Vault sound card. You know, yeah, I mean,
it might be hard.
You basically roll your own. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. Here's where we are.
I was going to talk to the last two bullets, but yeah, if you want,
let me go back then. No,
one.
We got time.
So and we also wanted to set the quality target to really high, because obviously we don't want to take people off air, and so we were setting that quality metric. We also wanted to feature match, so we kind of said we want it all, and we want it all as fast as possible, and the fastest possible was the price we paid. It wasn't as fast as you wanted it, and certainly not as fast as we wanted it, right. But we did want to be able to match the features with the Flash version right out of the gate as close as possible, so let's dive on ahead.
If you paraphrase the good, fast, cheap, you can have two. We were looking for good, fast, easy as our triangle. So we aimed at good and easy, and fast kind of got left. Well, you can't have all three again. So anyway, going back to Williams, no plan on costs at all
Right.
across the board for any of them. And
Yes.
whether or not there's hardware involved. If there is hardware involved for some older versions, it's possible. But where you're going to tend to run into that would be if your SBC had a failure anyway, and you just found it out in the course of doing the software update. But that's pretty unlikely.
Yeah.
All right, so here's where we are.
Here's where we are. Let's go to the next slide. So this is the VS300 running the beta 3, and that's the one that's running on my screen over here. And that one I've been running for 3 years now, in various forms. So it's doing really well. That's running an Orban, and so it's been running great. The next one.
Well,
We'll get into details on.
Yeah, Ray's asking, any plans to add external AES sync inputs? We use an Apogee Big Bin for common AES clock across stations. The short answer is that's outside the scope of the AUI. That's more exciter design question. There in the HD gear, we can do AES clocking pretty easily. We do have the ability to 10 megahertz clock. But for audio synchronization, you're almost best off going to external solutions for that. Okay.
And this is a real screen capture from the GV10, which is now in the truck on its way to NAB. And this is a touch screen on the front panel of the GV10. And as you can see, it's exactly the same code base. It happens to be doing in the what I call the 1+2 format, which is you've got the spectrum, you've got the modulation panel, and then the alarm panel down in the bottom right. But it reformats itself appropriately as you zoom in and out or have different resolutions and things like that. So that's a good thing. And this is the alpha version of the GV10, and it's coming along quite nicely.
So back to the questions. The questions.
Sure.
This is working out well. You'll do a slide. I'll do a question or two. William's asking what the oldest version of VS software that can be directly upgraded, and I'm assuming that means going straight from that version to the new AUI. As I know historically, like if you went from version 1 to version 2, that was fine, but if you wanted to go version 1 to version 4 or 5, then you had to go from 1 to 4 and then 4 to 5. I think might have to stop at 2 in the middle as well. So is this going to require us to get to version 4 or 5?
4.x. Yeah, so yeah, you need to go to 4x. And most people, I think if you talk to customer service, they would say go to 4.2.6 because that was a good one. And so that's the minimum requirement. And in the installation instructions, it talks about that.
Right.
How you get to 4.2.6 or 4.x is just read all the stuff. You could have done that in the past, but so you have to be on the flash version that's 4.x.
Right, and I mean, it's one of those, you had to be to version 2.3 or higher to run the Flash app anyway, I believe, right?
That part I'm not that familiar with. I don't really.
So
I haven't had to worry about that.
Either way, I mean, you're going to end up on 4. Something to be able to go up to the new AUI.
Yeah, at least. And sorry, yeah, carry on.
Going to say Jeff Wilson is the instigator in the crowd. He wants to know what the audio player looks like.
The audio player, as he full well knows, is not yet done. And I'm going to dive into what's not in the AUI section in a little bit.
Yeah, we'll hit that in a sec. Yeah. Williams asked if I can just swap a CF card and start from scratch. So the short answer is on NVs and GVs, you should be able to just do a CF card swap with the new software. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not actually familiar what the form factor, how we will get people to upgrade it. Maybe that you would put it, yeah, anyway, so that's actually that was a part of a discussion we were having just yesterday, is the actual steps to go through. But I think that what I would be tempted to do is certainly make a backup of the CF card that I had, and then upgrade the other one if the upgrade actually had to have a CF card with the flash
Right.
version.
I'm a big fan of having a backup regardless, because
Yeah.
these things do have a lifespan.
Yeah.
And on the VS, the NV Lite, and I think some of the NX, it's an
NX low
Intel ARM
power.
processor, yeah,
Yep.
with no CF card at all. So on those
That's
ones,
right.
you're doing
It's
the
flash.
USB
It's
stick
flash
upgrade.
memory
Yeah.
on the board. And
Right.
as I had mentioned before, the biggest challenge that we had was really around bootloaders and firmware on the VS. And what it was that we could upgrade something that was relatively new, no problem. And then as we had a couple of beta testers who went and tried it on something a bit older, and that didn't work. So
Yeah.
we incorporated that into the installation script, and then even older. So now we've gone through the full range because we realized that this was the Achilles heel of the
Right.
series. And now the installation will upgrade your firmware and the bootloader appropriately as the first step. And that's all dictated in the installation guide.
And for reference, for the folks at home that don't keep track of this stuff, the VS has been out since about 2009, 2010. There are 2 major bootloader iterations on 4 firmware platforms with 2 or 3 discrete hardware packages.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting realm area. Oh, and Mike is asking the question that everybody asks. He references all the folks south of 49 being outliers, but can the AUI be set for Fahrenheit, please?
Yeah.
I knew the answer. I was just letting you get the. So yeah, Mike, the new AUI will give you the. Now, here's the caveat. If you're running, and I may get this wrong, let's see, my AUI is switchable, but the reporting functions are still done in centigrade Celsius, right?
And that is a bug. So,
Oh,
we know that. So the intent is to whatever units you've chosen, that's the unit you want. And so the plan is to make is to have the reporting, and I'll show you the reporting in the demo. But the idea is that the reporting is far more than we ever did in the AUI before. So we're thinking this is pretty good as a start, and then as we get feedback, we'll make adjustments. Yeah, so and things like that were actually an oversight where, yeah, of course, if we're going to use Fahrenheit, we want to stick with
John says if we're going to do that, can we get the power in HP instead of kilowatts?
horsepower.
So anyway, Robert's asked if we resolve the issue where, let me scroll back down to it, network issue where my network DHCPs every 24 hours and I lose network connection. Had to do a special reboot the NIC every 24 hours.
Is that on a flash system?
I'm
I
not
assume that's
100% sure because there's no network interface card in a VS300 unless
well, it's on the board, I guess. So
right.
I think that the important thing is that the flash version for the VS, NV Lite and low power AM, NX, that networking was a little flaky on the flash version. What we found, and this will be borne out in the beta testing as we get into volume beta testing as opposed to 5 people, that we believe that the new AUI resolves the networking issues completely. That's our hope and our expectation. I've never seen a problem with it, so my expectation it should be fine. So SNMP, Ethernet, all of that, DHCP, it should all be fine.
Very cool.
Okay.
All right, ready to click forward?
Sure.
I mean, I know we're having fun.
So, and this is the VX. So the new VX series. This is a screenshot from that, and as you can see, it's the same again. Slightly different resolution, but basically the same. This one is actually in Fahrenheit, so there you can see the proof point there. And it was actually pretty funny because I said to the developer who was working on the temperature widget in the banner bar, I said, "Can I have Fahrenheit?" He says, "Yeah." Half an hour later, I had Fahrenheit. So that was pretty pretty awesome.
Yo,
Any more
the
questions?
the cool thing about the VX, and I'm just, because I can,
There
it
you go.
works great on a cell phone too now. And that's just using the Chrome browser. And in my case, I'm doing a VPN into the station. So
Perfect.
yeah, Elaine
Delicious.
says, make the US people learn the metric system. Oh, SNMP still supported? Yes.
Yes.
And the cool part, tell the cool part with the SNMP. We're not
Yeah.
just version 1 anymore.
Version 2C. So yeah.
Yeah. And absolutely, I mean, we did do the VX webinar on Thursday, so if you hit the webinar archives on the website, you can go back and find that. We covered it in excruciating depth with the guys that actually do the engineering, and that was cool. But yeah, still
And
supporting SNMP and the AUI as well.
yeah, and the intent is in the future. And again, this is all about preventing scope creep and thinking about what we should be doing or could be doing. Version 3 is expected to happen at some point because it's part of the backlog.
Yeah.
We maintain a pretty active backlog, so we pick and choose from that as we get the opportunity to sort of make improvements.
Yeah. Kira's asking hardware updates again on transmitters upgrading to the new AUI, and the short answer is not planned.
Yeah, there's no
shouldn't
hardware.
need it. It should be I say plug and play. It's software updates. So, depending on the transmitter, could be a couple seconds, could be half an hour. But once it's done, it's done. Go.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I was going to say that to upgrade a VS right now, if I'm going to go and install the beta, then it's you use the OS recovery method, and it takes about 40 minutes end to end. The big variable is whether your firmware needs to be updated along the way, in which case so there'll be a few extra steps.
Yep. And on the GVs, the NVs, when they're done, the high power NX 25s and 50s, if you get a CF card and preload it, then that'll be a much faster plug and play. And if you've got yourself up to version 4.3 and don't have to do that, or 4.2, sorry, 4.26. The 4.3 is the illegal version that I may or may not be running on Cove's VS1, but we're not talking about that right now. Anyway, or I just did. So if you've got it up to version 4.26, then it should be a less intrusive, but it still is an OS recovery, so there will be that.
You'll be off air for a little while, so plan it. You'll need to plan it. The other thing that's very important to note is that it is a one-way street. So once you've gone to HTML5 version of AUI, there is no getting back unless you really feel like sending your transmitter back to the factory. So it's very important that you pick the right time for upgrading, based on what you're seeing in the world. So
little side note, Aaron's coming to us. Aaron's normally in Rhode Island, but he's way over on the other end of the continent in Sitka, Alaska this week. So Aaron, who's up early, mentioned last week during our VX webinar that talking about translators that'll translate between SNMP v3 and v2, because there is some adjusting to do. And he has linked the translator or the piece of hardware he's been able to find in the questions. So if anybody's looking for such a device, give me a holler and I'll certainly get you a link.
cool.
Or I may even grab it and copy and paste it in a moment. Mike's asking if the J1000's getting this. The answer is no. Now, for what it's worth though, Mike, the J1000, unless you've got version 1, version 2 or so of the J1000, about the second revision, anything since the mid 2000s for sure, is got a, it's basically an HTML to serial interface box plug-in that's an option. And so it's already running HTML. It's pretty basic. It doesn't give you the fancy interface. It's a text-based interface, but you do already have the ability.
Is that the NX link?
Yes, correct.
NX link, yeah. Okay.
And let's
Different
see,
product.
Aaron says, okay, so Babel Busters from CSI is the SNMP translator that Aaron's talking about. Babel is
Okay.
in the Tower of. So certainly you can Google that. All right, moving on.
Next slide.
I'm there.
So here's the development status. So I'm going through this in a fairly step-by-step manner. So the VS where the focus is on testing and quality, and and so that's why we're now into beta 3, and beta 3 has got most of the features are there. We're pretty happy with the installation. I've been running a lot, and Orban has never had a problem on the VS. So that's in pretty good shape. And the beta 3, yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. The VX is shipping, so the lower powers of the VX are available right now, and that the higher powers will come along. There'll be some adjustments in the AUI for the higher powers, the 3 to 6 kilowatt. But
Right.
that's just around the corner. And then, as I mentioned before, the GV is 95% feature complete, and that's a very ballpark figure. I'm just kind of guesstimating there.
Right.
But you can see that on the floor and at NAB as well if you're going to be there.
Right.
The
So
other
these
ones
are the
will
ones
follow.
that,
So
let's say these are the ones that we have at some level of development right now.
correct.
Okay. And then moving on to the big plan. So
the rollout, yeah. So beta 3 released. That was actually yesterday that I made that announcement. So I was very happy to be able to say that before this TTT. So that's out, and I've had a flurry of emails in my inbox to request the beta, and I'll be fulfilling those over the next few days. And then the GV we mentioned is an internal alpha. The VX series is released, and then the 3 to 6 we have an internal alpha for that, and that's the one that's running on the show floor at NAB. And then NX, NV Lite, and MV, those are all down the road later this year. We haven't necessarily determined even an order. We'll be taking a look at what should be done next, what could be done next, and so there you go. That's the rollout.
So the cool thing is that the VS uses an internal ARM processor with multiple iterations of hardware and firmware. The GV uses a single board computer with its own microcontroller. The VX uses dual DSP with the memory on SD card, or the operating system. And the NX, NV Lite, and NV all use some variation of one of those.
Yeah.
So once we've got the top 3 done, the biggest hurdles are crossed, and that's kind of reassuring.
Yeah.
Kind of reassuring. Like I said, my credibility's shot to hell already, because I've been saying we'll have it for you by next NAB for about 4 NABs, including the 2 that get canceled, due to the little epidemic and stuff. So I'm not going to say next NAB, but I'm more optimistic that we'll see it sooner rather than later. You're kind of shooting to have it all done and dusted well before then, right?
Yes, that's the hope. The thing that sends us sideways is when we hit a brick wall or something that's just kind of like, oh, didn't think
well, like when Alex
see
tries
that
to load it into VS1 serial number 1 and says,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Alex gets blamed for a lot of things because Alex has collected serial number 1 of most of our current transmitters.
Right.
So, all right.
What's not in this? So let me dive into that. So in the VS Beta 3 specifically, we were going to have HD support, and I'm sorry, but it was mostly complete, and then something went wrong, and we just did not want to hold back the Beta 3. My call was to say, look, we just need to get Beta 3 out there for everything that's non-HD. That's a good thing to do. And so that's what we did. So there'll be a Beta 4, and that will have HD and anything else that was that's been fixed between the Beta 3 and the 4. So the Beta 4, my expectation for VS will be an incredibly, it'll be feature complete and very high quality. That's the goal. so that it's literally the sort of the pre-release candidate for getting us out there. The second thing that's not in there yet is the mobile device optimization. Now, as you could see from what Jeff showed you, that you can put it on your phone, not a problem, but it's not optimized in the way that we would expect it to. So
like
Jeff
if I
is
flip
probably
the phone,
Jeff is probably running, I don't know, the desktop mode, or if not, then it's actually behaving quite nicely. But if you leave it in the mobile phone, it uses responsive design to sort of readjust the way it looks, and that's not, we haven't touched that code. So the default responsive design is not particularly very clean, and so we will get to that later. We figured that since you can always choose in your browser to access the desktop site and just get a miniature version of it, that's a perfectly reasonable workaround and gives you everything you need. And then probably the hardest one for us is the audio player. So as I said, we're using this version of Linux called Yocto, and it turned out it didn't even have an audio driver in it. So we were put into a position for VS specifically that we have to try and figure out how to build one. And we've spent a lot of effort on that, and we think we're onto something now where we believe that there will be a solution for that. But at this point, it would be foolish to say that we're going to get there. So that's on the VS ARM-based systems. For GV, we don't believe it should be as much of an issue, but it's also not much of an interest either. It's not many. I don't know the percentage of people with GVs who actually depend on an audio player.
So the one thing you are forgetting is the audio players used to configure streams like live stream, which is used. So,
yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway,
that is a downside. But as I say, our expectation is that not so much of an issue for GV, MV, and NX high power, I guess.
right.
But the ARM-based ones, it would be. And then for VX, which does not yet have an audio player, we are more optimistic about that one happening sooner. And there's work going on both the VS and the VX right now. So we'll know within a month or so how that's going to play out. And that's, oh, sorry about that. That was a bad pun.
I don't think it was even intentional. William wants to know if we're going to raffle off the VX transmitters in the NAB booth. And one of them you can't have. It's my sales demo. I think the other sales guys might put up a little bit of a fight. Now, if you wanted to buy it. So John's asked if LiveWire is included yet. And again, that comes back to audio player. When you see audio player, the hope is that there will be at least some level of streaming included. And I think now whether you got LiveWire Plus or not, that's a whole different thing. We didn't support it before. I don't think there's any plans to add it. But at this point, getting it done. I mean, getting something done and out there, then we can start looking at additional features.
I mean, the important thing to remember is that this is a whole new platform. The only thing that's common to both is the hardware. And so if we make an audio player, it's going to be based on something newer, and the driver will obviously be newer as well. So we do get the opportunity to review what we support in it. But if it comes down to licensing and things like that, that's a different thing. So there is an opportunity to expand what it does support. Whether we do that or not, we're not limited by the fact that it used to not be available on Flash, sort of thing. So there's a kind of an opportunity there. Yeah, so it is a challenge. So we'll see what happens. The other thing that I have to remind myself is that even if we get the driver for the audio driver for this particular platform, that doesn't necessarily mean that the ARM processor has the horsepower to run everything. So I have to be fairly cautious about the kinds of promises that I'm making on the ARM platform, because it's working pretty hard.
And there are a lot of conversations back and forth with could we do this instead, or could we do that instead? And so it's led to some fairly I'm going to say passionate discussions.
Enthusiastic.
That's a good word. I like that one. All right, moving on. So you got space in here for a demo. We've got a fair bit of time. I say a fair bit of time. I mean, you don't have all day, but
should I grab the presenter stick?
You've got the ability to take the stick, so why don't you? You've got the helm.
Let's see what. We'll do this one clean. There we go. So can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay,
let's
great.
See. Keith's asking what series of transmitters is LiveWire available for, and the short answer is at this point none, but should be for all of them when it's done.
Okay.
That sound fair?
Yep. So this is my VS 300, which is, am I pointing at it? Yes.
Yeah.
That is my wall-mounted VS. You can see the handles at the top here. So I don't like it to take a lot of space. It actually works really well in the winter as a heater as well. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's a VS 300, and it's been running the AUI HTML5 version for a number of years now. And I'll give you a quick tour of it, but feel free to jump in with questions. So this is the layout that I call the 1+4. So we can see that the one big one is the spectrum analyzer here. And then we've got 4 smaller panels, which is the modulation, audio inputs, alarms, and meters. You can put anything you want anywhere. So I could take the spectrum analyzer away and pop in the meters, and then I could go and put the spectrum analyzer over here if I wanted to. So it's a little slow today. I don't know quite why. I think my connection to my transmitter from my work computer is a little clunky, but you can sort of move things around like that, and it remembers from your login. It will remember what layout you've done. So when you log back in again, it'll still be the same. I'll put it back the way it was.
In the meantime, Williams made the comment, if your VS300 makes a good heater, it must not be very efficient. We all know that's not true, but I'm going to assume you've probably got a dummy load attached to it as well.
I do, yeah. It doesn't need to heat. My room is actually quite a well-insulated room, so it doesn't take much to heat it up. So it's not even running. It's not even doing RF. So I'm not.
And of course, if we did have an antenna attached to it, we wouldn't be selling it on a recording.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no.
Now you got to remember too, Matt's youth was spent. I mean, you grew up back in the Radio Caroline days, so.
Yep, Radio North Sea, Radio Caroline, Radio Varnica, Radio Luxembourg. Yeah, I used to listen to the pirate radio. Oh, wait a second, here we go. Show and tell. I used to listen to it at my high school in England, using one of those little cream-colored things that you're putting on this actual radio. So that is the Sony radio that I used when I was in my early teens listening to pirate radio. And I loved those days. Let's get back to the AUI, shall we? If an element on the dashboard has a little gear icon, that means you can configure that particular panel. So here we can add different things to the meter. So we can put something there and go ahead and save it, and it will appear after a couple of heartbeats down at the bottom here. So we can see that. The top banner shows the active preset and along with its name. It also shows the call sign, and I'll talk about that and highlight it when we get into the settings. It also has a drop down for picking a preset. So in this particular one, we've got a whole bunch of different presets, and we could choose one of these and switch to it right here. If I choose, say, the tower maintenance, and I can choose that, then it will, a couple of heartbeats. Now it's telling me that I'm on the tower maintenance one, which is, and then if we wanted, we could go back to my other preset there. And then Off to the side, we've got the date and the time, and also the hamburger menu, which is, of course, a familiar feature of modern day web apps, and the main menu. We'll dive into that in a second. Along the banner bar, we have the remote local indicator. If it's in local mode, in other words, as a remote user, I can't make changes to it. I can just view stuff for safety reasons or whatever. Then the actual top banner, which is the dark blue, will go yellow, just to let you really be, or red, excuse me. Yellow is for installations. Here will go red, just to let you know. So if you've got this, you can check it on your phone as you're leaving the transmitter site and go, oops, I left it on local only mode. I'd better go back in and change it. Then in the middle, we've got the forward power, the reflective power, the temperature in Fahrenheit, and modulation indicators, and then the RF on and off. If I click this, it will start up, and you might be able to hear it in the background. I can barely hear myself think. And we can turn that back off again. And then the alarm indicator. So if I click on the alarm, it will take me to the alarms page. I've only got one here, but if I want to ignore that one, I can just click on it and it becomes filtered out of view. If I want to see the filtered alarms, I can do that, and then I can choose that one back again.
So Keith has asked why the spectrum analyzer data peak is showing 10 dB below the mask peak. Short answer is depends on the averaging, the video bandwidth, the resolution bandwidth, and those are all adjustable. I think video bandwidth and VBW and RBW are tied together like they are in a lot of analyzers. And also this transmitter's turned off at the moment, so it's just looking at its last sample.
Right, and it's mine, and I don't know what I'm doing. There's a shortcut here which takes you to reports. We're going to go to reports the other way, so but I can just do that, and it'll jump me over to the reports page. And reports will tell me what the events have been. It's an event log. You can filter it. You can download the reports. It comes down in CVS format. You don't have to. It's a lot simpler and more straightforward than the Flash version. You can also click on, you can download the information about active preset, the meters, and also the settings that you've got. This is one bug that we have got, which is this has not been translated properly yet, but we know that. And the filters are up here, so you can filter that way. And we can see that the RF state change has been logged here from when we just did that.
Kira's asking, no, that's okay. As the questions pop up, I'll interrupt you.
Sure.
Kira's asking if you can adjust the banner bar at all and change the overall size of the widget panels. For context, wondering if you can move the modulation meter bar to the banner bar.
So if we go back to here, we've got this modulation meter bar. You would like to see that up here? Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Put it up in the banner bar, yeah.
Not at this point. I mean, these are just widgets, but at the same time, what if I were to, if I do Control Plus, which zooms me in and makes it more and more like a phone, so you can kind of see that we're getting a bit squished here, that once we get onto a phone, we might want to actually have those in a little square matrix of 4 numbers that are properly aligned that way. So at this point, there hasn't been a thought to change this to be an analog meter, but we listen to what you say and what you prefer. So if that's more helpful, then we're willing to contemplate that for sure.
Take a note.
What's that?
Take a note.
Yeah, and you had pointed that out on the, I think it was you that pointed that out on the VX display on the front panel. There's also the same number as on that VX panel, and you would prefer to see that as an analog readout. It's more useful.
Right.
So I get that.
Mike's just come in chimed in with an agree in the question bar too. So
yeah, understandable. And then this is the meters page, so we can see all the meters. Bear in mind, this is HTML. So if you happen to want to just grab these values, you can just do that and Control C and then go into a text pad or something like that and dump that into a text file. And it's it just works immediately. So you don't have to play around. The problem with Flash was that it's a bitmap. So every function like that had to actually be built into the code. Presets. Here are all the presets. We can go in and edit them. I'm going to edit. If I go into edit this one, this should look and kind of feel very familiar. So we've tried to keep things done in the spirit of the Flash one, just make it look nicer and not be Flash. There's the audio, the SCA, blah, blah, blah. So all of those good things. There's a scheduler as well, very similar. So nothing too surprising there, I don't think. And settings, which probably the more interesting one. One of the big things that I pushed when we were doing this sort of rationalization of it was to bring all the settings under one umbrella, as opposed to, was that user settings or system settings? And that's a joke that Flash AUI people would understand immediately.
Well, anybody who's seen me working on one, I'll always out loud, yeah, it's one or the other, and I'm going to guess wrong 100% of the time.
Exactly.
Stan's also asked if the new AUI supports FSKID, and I know historically we didn't have it before. It was always front panel only on the.
Oh, I see.
No, it's
Sorry,
a front panel adjustment.
No.
Yeah, but not part of the AUI, and that's the same with the new AUI, correct?
I think so, because I think it's kind of at that level, that kind of firmware, or yeah. So
and I mean, now certainly if you could make a case,
isn't it preset?
Yes. FSKID, no, it's done separately on the front panel of the transmitter and user settings.
Yeah, yeah, because that's
or system settings.
Yeah, or system settings. True. Anywho, moving on. So here are all the settings, the ISO, Exciter TCXO, external. You can see the menu option for HD. I don't have HD, so it's not on here. From the philosophical, conceptual, I'm not quite sure the right word, but one of the design criteria was to sort of have menus that didn't change depending on what transmitter you are logged into. So if this didn't have an Orban in it, the audio processing menu would just be grayed out. Because we know that so many customers have multiple transmitters, it's really important to not have the ground shifting underneath you every time you switch. So you kind of go, oh yeah, this is the VS that doesn't have audio processing, because the menu is grayed out. I found that the Flash version was really hard. You would never develop any muscle memory because the menu is always moving around. It was like one of those little games you slide the letters around on the plastic square. Network, information, notifications, you do those setup, send test emails and stuff like that. So that all works. And again, this now supports the more secure versions of email notification setup. In this particular case, I've set it up with an app password, which is the new way of doing it with Google Mail. And so once it has that, you just enter that in, and it's good to go. And it's a more secure approach, and it's supported by Google. You can have security certificates and SNMP. You can do all your setup here, and there's the version V2C. You can see it's a drop down. The drop down doesn't work yet, but one day it'll have 3 in there. Spectrum mask, you can choose that. System preferences. This is just for whoever asks the question about the Fahrenheit or Celsius question. So there may be other system preferences we put in here one day, but for now, it's just Fahrenheit or Celsius. So we can switch to that.
Kelvin just yet?
Kelvin, that's too much for people. But as soon as you change it from the setting that it is currently, it recognizes you've made a change. And so the icon, the save icon changes from gray to blue, and we save it, and voila, you get the toast, which is this little green display down at the bottom. How are we doing on time? Pretty good. And you can set your thresholds, time, NTP, blah, 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 all that good stuff. And then this, I think, is a very handy one. It's we realized that a lot of people were using the call sign field in the Flash one to put anything but a call sign into it. I think Alex referred to one of his GVs as beer fridge. The important thing is that we just wanted you to know that this field can be used for anything you want to identify this transmitter. So I put it in here as VS300 CMIC, which is my fake radio station here, because just down the hill is an island called Micouz, so that's CMIC. And then, but the useful one is the serial number. So I will be encouraging and do encourage people to fill out the serial number because if you're phoning customer service, it's so much easier to look at this than go and look at the back panel of the transmitter that's halfway up or all the way up a mountain. So it's a good thing. It is a good spot where you can actually keep that. There's also some additional information at the top here. So your MAC address and the model of the transmitter, it all gets pre-populated for you, which is why it's in gray. And then last but not least, in the settings are your users. You can set up new users. They have permissions. And so if I go into here, we can see that we can have, first name, last name, email, blah, blah, blah. There will be other languages in the future. And then you can set your permissions down here. And that user can also change their password here. And you can create as many accounts as you want. You can't delete the last admin account. It will prevent you.
You could at one point. I guess who found that?
And I know certain people who decided that sounded like a really great idea.
No, well, when you give me a beta unit and say, play, let's see what this button does.
Oh, was it you?
It was me.
Sorry, I think I know. Remote IO, everything's here except site control. Site control, you can still do it. In the previous beta, this wasn't here at all. We've added it back. We've put it back in and finished it. So you've got the digital outputs, inputs, and analog outputs. And then site control will be added at some point as well, probably in the beta 4, I imagine. But the good news is that I believe you can do all those settings on the front panel UI anyway.
Now, Jay Cole has asked why we don't auto-populate the serial number since it doesn't change. And I think the short answer, especially on the low power transmitters like the VX series, they're built in a batch. You'll get 10 identical VX300s rolling off and going through an auto test station. And the serial number typically gets assigned as it's getting packed up to go out the door.
Yeah.
So the serial number in-house could change 4 times before it goes in the box. And that would be the big reason that I can think.
Yeah, and the automatic would actually be someone at the end of the line typing it in. And so, yeah, it would be fantastic if that happened, but it cannot.
Now, well, no, cannot's a big word, but likely will not. Anything like that involves clock cycles involves cost, and
exactly.
It's sort of like the guys at Walmart. The more cost we can download, the lower the prices are.
Yeah,
within reason.
We've talked about reports, and then the last one that we need to talk about is the software, and this shows you the version that you're on of the OS, and this is 6.0 beta 3, and then all the various versions of the plugins that do all the work. And then this page is the upgrades page. This is not working in beta 3, so if you're going to apply for the beta 3, don't try and use this, it won't work. But what will happen is that you can choose, if you choose browse, I can break it, I won't, don't break, and it will go to your computer desktop. So if you're remote and there's an update, not the full OS recovery thing, which has to be done from front panel UI, there will be an update, and you could upload it to the transmitter, maybe, because this is a VS and we haven't sort of finished this part yet. Or you can choose it from the USB, and the USB would appear, it would say upgrade version here, and then the source would say USB-A or whatever. And so it would then upload it, and then you could choose, this green would go to bright green, and you could start the upgrade. So that's working quite nicely on certainly on the VX, where we've first sort of refined it. And the next thing that one of the other things that we want to do in the beta 4 is to have this all up and running as well.
Curious asked also if we have the MIB file posted yet for the SNMP control of the VX transmitters with the new AUI.
Say that again?
Is the MIB file posted up on the FTP site for the
MIB
VX?
file for the current version of it is there, yes. Okay. It should be on the site, on the FTP site.
Right. Now for VS and the other stuff, not yet, but pending, because I assume the MIBs will change with the new AUI.
The important thing is that we got some really good feedback from one of our customers far, far away, and they said they didn't like our MIBs, and they said that our MIBs were horrible. And
they were
so
pretty clunky.
They were not elegant, let me put it that way. And so they worked, but they could have been better. And so we've redesigned those on the VX, and that will ripple over into all the other ones. But we're going to get them all tidied up and cleaned up, and then and then stick a new stake in the ground and say that is our base MIB. So whatever MIBs you've got in VX right now, if you're a new customer for VX, that MIB will change in the not too distant future. And for VS, there is a MIB here that goes with the beta. That will also change. So we're making it better. The challenge with MIBs is that you really want to come out strong and have something super clean as your baseline, and then move on from there. And that's what the lesson we learned from that one beta customer was a very strong one, which is like, yeah, no, you can do better.
Well, once you set the goal post, all you can do is tweak it.
Yeah.
You can't just rip it out and put it in again.
Exactly.
So, very cool.
Anything? I'm trying to think if there was anything else on this page or any other ones, but yeah, any other questions?
Well, off the so sticking on the SNMP, Mike wants to know if the object identifiers change. Are the OIDs the same in the new MIBs?
No. So when you have the OIDs or the OIDs in the MIB are a function of the data architecture within the transmitter in the software. And because we've changed the software, the architecture is now all brand new. And as a result, the structure is different and the OIDs have to change. So
right. Now, if you're running a packaged remote like the Burkhart Touch Plus or the Davicoms, where or the WorldCast stuff, those are the three I know about for sure, then you can just download the new MIB file and store it in your remote and you're good to go.
That is my understanding.
If you're running a home-built system, then yeah, there's going to be some work required.
Yeah, and you would go, so when you download the version of the software, whether it's 5.x on Flash or the new 6.x for HTML5, you would grab the associated MIB file to go with that. And if you choose to go to 6.1 or 2 or whatever happens down the road that has a different MIB, you grab that MIB and ripple that out to wherever you're using SNMP against that one transmitter.
Right. And again, if you're using a self-built or like Passler or something like that, where you configure it yourself, there is going to be some rework required.
Yeah. And I think the goal is that the new MIB and its OIDs will be better named, better structured, and that's really the goal of this recent little bit of work, is to give you something where you kind of go through it and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. This is quite nicely done. Yeah, I like this.
Yep. Right. Mike mentions that on the ARC Plus, the MIB's only used during setup, and then the unit remembers the OIDs. So yeah,
Right.
you basically, you're going to end up doing
You're going to teach it.
you're going to
Yeah.
run it through a new setup. Yeah.
And we try to,
Cool.
our goal is to proactively go to people like WorldCast and Davicom and so on, and Burke and so on, and say, hey, here's our new MIPS, and this is what we're doing, because then they can install that. A lot of times, I think they just help themselves from our FTP site and stick them in there. So yeah, that's cool.
Yep.
I don't know if there were more slides and whether you want to return to those or.
Let's
That's
see,
probably
we
good for a demo.
got 3 or 4 more. You want to flip her back over? Or actually, I'll take control and
Yeah,
we'll
sure.
just carry on.
Indeed.
Make sure I show the right screen. I don't think I've got anything too disturbing on either of them at the moment. So out of the demo, let's see, we're at the top of the hour, but we're pretty close. So the goal, obviously, familiar, easy to learn, and the big goal was to minimize, as you said, the earth moving underneath you, the platform shift, if you will, the learning curve from one to another.
Yeah.
And
it was. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that it was kind of cool because I arrived at the company at just the right time. I arrived in 2016, and we realized that Flash had to go, and so the first thing I did was go and look at Flash a lot. And since I hated it, and I knew nothing about radios or radio transmitters, it was a really good headspace to be in, to sort of be quite critical and then to be able to say, okay, so if we were to take this stuff over here and put it into something new, and I knew a lot about new software, then it could be this, this, and this. And then we had a design house that did a really nice job of also incorporating all of that knowledge that we pulled together. And we did a bunch of user testing as well. So that
there may have been some wailing and gnashing of teeth in the process. What
that's
do you
true.
mean icons? What is all these icons?
What's an icon?
I don't know who that guy was. So quick plug, one of the other things that you will see at NAB is this sneak preview here, but a very, very gentle one, talking about some of the new stuff we're doing with HD radio and trying to reduce the cost a little and maximize the power and flexibility. And we've been lucky enough that Philip has been able to come up with a platform that really seems to do all that nicely. If you haven't signed up for our webinar on Thursday, this would be the time where you toddle off to our website, hit the resources tab or media, I forget, whatever tab you get to webinars, and go there. And definitely get registered for that one, because there's some pretty cool stuff coming. We're a couple minutes past the top of the hour, so this webinar, as with all, there it is, it's the resources tab. Look, it's right there. But this webinar will be archived. You can always get to it later. As I said, we did a really in-depth of the VX transmitter last Thursday, and covered the AUI to some extent in that as well. So by all means, you can go in. Normally we try to get these done in an hour. I think we went in an hour and a half on that one. But absolutely, it was a great time. YouTube channel, Waves newsletter, the online stuff like Barry Michigan's BDR. I think you're on his BDR lunch on Thursday, aren't you, Matt?
I am indeed.
So you can go to our webinar, skip out of that. We'll try not to run too late. Go to Barry's BDR lunch and listen to Matt talk about the AUI again. And we'll put them under the gun. Ask the difficult questions we didn't ask today. All right, on that note, folks, I want to thank you all. We'll give you, I won't say the rest of your day back, but we didn't run as long as we usually do. So, Matt, I want to thank you a lot for taking an hour to be with us today.
Glad to be here.
And folks, thank you all very much, and hopefully we'll see you Thursday. Have a great day, everybody. Bye now.
Sounds good.